Good afternoon, and I call this meeting to order at 1:17 p.m. on October 10th, 2023. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. My name is Harry Spikes. I'm the chairman, and what I'm going to do now from my left is ask everyone to introduce themselves, and then we will begin.
Eric Holcomb, Executive Director, CHAP.
Sarah Langmead, Commissioner.
Jill Dennis, Commissioner.
Gary Rodwell, Commissioner representing the preservation community as expressed through Baltimore Heritage and the Compton Heights Community Development.
Tamara Woods, Commissioner representing DHCD.
Capel Lynn, Commissioner.
Garrett Power, Commissioner.
Nicole Battle, Commissioner representing Nonprofit Housing Development.
Ann Powell, Commissioner representing Greater Baltimore Committee.
Good afternoon, John Bullock representing Baltimore City Council.
CHAP staff, please introduce yourself.
Lauren Shizik, CHAP staff.
Caitlin Audette, CHAP staff.
Thank you all. To all who here, welcome. The CHAP mission is to enhance and promote the cultural and economy of Baltimore through the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, and neighborhoods that have aesthetic, historic, and architectural value. The goals of CHAP include preserving historic architecture and monuments, reclaiming broken neighborhoods, preventing demolition by neglect, and integrating our city's past into its future. We have a few housekeeping items. You'll see here in front of me that I have a couple sheets. These sheets were outside. These sheets are for anyone who would like to speak. If you have not signed in and you want to speak on a certain topic, let us know and you're able to put your name down. A couple things. If your phone is on, put it on vibrate. I don't tell people to take their phone off because some people have emergency calls. Put your phone on vibrate. If you have a conversation that you need to take it outside. And you may hear me hit the gavel if I hear people speak because we try to, keep it really focused up here. But if you have a conversation, once again, take it outside. When you see people come up, you'll probably see some folks come up who want to testify, and that's what these sheets allow us to do. I usually lift my gavel up. We give people 3 minutes to speak. If I lift my gavel up like this, that means you have 30 seconds left. Normally, I do not slam the gavel on anybody, but every once in a while, I do. So just be mindful of that. Keep your comments to a minimum and make sure that there's not a lot of conversation. Also, too, next door, you'll be hearing some construction. There'll be some construction going on. If you need to use the restrooms, it's out there. Commissioners also restrooms. Use these, not those. You will see that we don't have our name tags, so the commissioners will mention their name before they speak, and so we'll move forward. Thank you. I would like to make a motion to waive the reading of the minutes. All in favor? All opposed? All abstain? Ayes have it. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Gotcha. I would like to make a motion to adopt the minutes. Do I have a second? Oh, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Due process and review procedures. CHAPS reviews applications in conjunction with the building permit process of the permit section of the Department of Housing and Community Development. If a building permit application is filed prior to historic design review, the application is placed on hold. Pending completion of the CHAP review process, the review process is completed by issuing an authorization to proceed. The historic design review process is in addition to other applicable laws and regulations. It does not diminish the force of urban renewal plans, building codes, zoning codes, etc. It is the applicant's responsibility to comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and codes. Proposed projects are reviewed prior to issuing a building permit. Applicants must comply with the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in planning and executing their projects. Design review considers the proposed work, take into consideration the historical and architectural character of the structure and all of the immediate area. Applicants will need to clearly explain how their project complies with the design guidelines. Minor projects. In order to expedite the application process, the Commission has delegated review authority to the Executive Director for cases involving minor work. Minor projects must not significantly change the overall appearance or remove the significant undamaged historic fabric. All minor work must clearly meet the design guidelines. Major projects. Major projects may change the overall character, appearance, and integrity of the structure. Substantial building alterations, demolitions, additions, and new construction are considered major projects and are reviewed at a public hearing. Interested parties should request a pre-development meeting in the planning department to begin the review process. An electronic version of all materials must be submitted to the CHAP staff at least 25 calendar days prior to the public hearing date. If the application is complete, the project shall be scheduled for a public hearing. CHAP hearings. At the public hearing, CHAP staff presents recommendations to the commission regarding the project. Following the staff presentation, the applicant may make a presentation to the commission. Interested parties, including neighborhood associations, have the opportunity to provide public testimony. Following testimony, the commission renders a decision on the application at the public hearing. Persons aggrieved by the decision of the commission may seek judicial and appellate review in accordance with the Baltimore City Code. After an authorization to proceed is issued, the applicant may obtain a building permit. The commission's process is impartial, and staff comments are evidence that assist the commission in rendering decisions. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the final agenda.
So move.
All in favor? Any abstain? All opposed? Let us begin. First, we have on our regular agenda, we have the working session Conservation Districts conversation, and its request consideration of the establishment of conservation districts. Oh, that's right, I have to do that. Forgive me, y'all. Consent agenda. We have, for our consent agenda, we have 1041 William Street, Federal Historic District. I have a motion to waive the consent agenda?
So move.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Now let's do the regular agenda. Working session conservation districts, and the request is consideration of the establishment of conservation districts. And the staff is Eric Holcomb.
I'd first like to turn it over to Dr. Rodwell here, who's the chairman of the chair of the committee, and have him say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Executive Director and Mr. Chair, for asking me to say a couple of words in opening up our work on this very important topic. With my time, I'd like to offer a few words of thanks and then reflect on how we move forward. I would first like to thank the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation, many of whom I see here, and the president around the table and the executive director here, and the preservation community represented by Baltimore Heritage for asking me to serve in this capacity. I would also like to thank Mayor Scott, who appointed us all, and throughout our over a year-long COVID confirmation process, had a specific aim in mind as he assembled this group with a majority of new Board of Commissioners members and some strategic reappointments of past commissioners. Yes, the mayor wanted us to advance the historic and architectural agenda for our city, but he wanted us to do our work with a focus on equity. That focus on equity was reiterated when our chair, Harry Spikes, brought us together at our lunch when many of us first met each other. Over the past year, I have watched us as commissioners diligently invoke that lens in every aspect of our work, whether it be in our series of planning retreats or on our committee assignments as we look to review various aspects of our work, from education to public outreach to policies and procedures. And I thank you all as commissioners for that commitment. As chair of our Conservation District Committee, my fellow Commissioner Woods here and I have been equally focused on equity, and that is the reason for my excitement this afternoon. The idea of infusing greater equity in our application of the Historic Tax Credit Neighborhood designation is not new to this committee. And you will hear from our executive director the long hours of research and effort that this commission has put in over the years. But like many challenges to inequity in our society, somehow they rarely find their way to the front burner. But this is a front burner moment, and I have to thank our ED and chair for it. I particularly want to acknowledge our chair who leads us in such a professional manner. I think we all agree around this table that he constantly amazes us in how he does everything, and I mean everything from addressing the public in our hearings to how he approaches and manages our work with a sense of equity and fairness. My hope is that today is the beginning of a long overdue movement toward greater equity in our allocation of tax credits to our neighborhoods, and that a year from now, we will have made some progress. In closing, I want to share something with you which just came to my attention over the weekend. In finishing up a book that I believe was published by one of our past commission members, Mr. Philip Merrill, he wrote a book called Images of America, Baltimore and the Civil Rights Movement. On the last page of that book, there is a letter and a paragraph that goes along with the letter. Let me read to you the paragraph. While historic designation for white communities has been common practice for many decades, Black neighborhoods were often overlooked. In this 1978 letter, Milton E. Branch Sr., president of the Madison Avenue Neighborhood Club, expressed his desire for the 2200 through the 2300 blocks of Madison Avenue to be designated as a historic neighborhood. Ultimately, the club was going to send a letter to Mayor William Donald Schaefer and ask him to support the designation. This letter encouraged residents and politicians to lend their assistance to the effort. So in closing, I think this is a question of political will. And so I believe that we're all going to have to work together to ensure that this doesn't recede to the back burner again, but that we truly make some progress on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodwell, for those kind and meaningful words. Appreciate that. I'd just like to first start out in saying that, this is the first time we're bringing this idea to the public realm, and you will see a report here that has ideas that are drawn out into bullet points and outlines and things. But I want to just ensure the group out there, the population, that this is just the beginning. Nothing is set in stone. As a staff, as executive director, I always want to make sure that we do have something that the commission can respond to, that the public can respond to, and we hope that you will respond. And if you think that some of the ideas are silly, please let us know. If you think they're great, please let us know. If you have new ones, we really look forward to hearing from them. So let me get going with this sort of introduction to conservation districts. So what are conservation districts? Well, the way that we see it in Baltimore, we see that they would have a concentration of historically significant structures that together create a unique historic character for neighborhoods that is worthy for preservation for future generations. As proposed, the Conservation District would protect its historic character through a CHAP administered design review process for new construction, demolition, and limited types of alterations. This would be different from the local historic districts that we have currently, where all exterior alterations are reviewed and approved by CHAP. The Conservation District would be a less restrictive design review for the local historic districts for Baltimore City. We would not review every exterior change in a conservation district, but just limited changes. I also wanted just to pause right now and tell you what a conservation district is not. And I say this because from the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act forward, conservation districts were first presented to preserve neighborhood characters for areas that would not meet the designation criteria for local historic designation. But CHAP staff believes that this is not a good reason today to create conservation districts, and that this idea is not applicable anymore We believe that a conservation district would be as historic as a local historic district, as historic as a National Register historic district. And the reason why we say this is because preservation has changed. From the 1970s through the 2000s, what was considered not historic, we would now consider historic. And a lot of that is really to capture and expand significance to really celebrate the what we would say marginalized communities through that time. Also, preservationists see that many structures with incompatible alterations or in states of deterioration still retain their historic character, and that alterations could in fact contribute to the character or significance of a property, meaning that we see that the physical integrity of districts, we see that some neighborhoods still have historic integrity that they wouldn't have thought back in the 70s or even back in the 2000s. I remember arguing with the National Register Administrator from Maryland Historical Trust on several properties, which right now the trust would now consider those areas eligible, like Sharp Lettenhall, for example. So why a conservation district proposal? This is where I had a little fun with numbers, so let's see if it makes sense. There are 92 historic districts in Baltimore City, and only 38 of those historic districts are local historic districts. So that means that 54 National Register historic districts and National Register designation does not provide any type of design review or protections in that neighborhood. That means 54 of those National Register historic districts are not protected by local designation. You could tear down whatever you want. You could put as much vinyl windows or vinyl siding or whatever you want to do to your property. The second thing is that we have 38 local historic districts in Baltimore City. CHAP was created in 1964. That means that we have been designating local historic districts at a rate of about one district for every 1.5 years. At this rate, it would take CHAP over 300 years to really designate all of the built neighborhoods out there that are worthy of designation. So, in short, we want a conservation district. We think that it would be a way to actually get more neighborhoods protected. And of course, the conservation districts can become another tool to preserve our history and, more importantly, use that history to revitalize our communities. So the proposed benefits of a historic conservation would be the following. Of course, it would preserve and protect the overall historic character. It would provide a public forum for community input for new construction, demolition, and major alterations. It would provide properties and conservation districts would be eligible to apply for the local historic preservation tax credit, and we would hope the state historic preservation tax credit. We would work very hard to make sure that that would occur. And we would also, it also allows for affordable maintenance and rehabilitation costs while preserving that historic character. And it preserves and celebrates the history of all Baltimoreans. So let me go back and just say that I think I go out to neighborhoods about 6 times a year and talk about local historic district designation. And when I talk about the design review component, saying that every alteration, every exterior alteration has to be reviewed and approved by CHAP, and it has to meet our historic preservation design guidelines. That's when those communities, and I've been 6 for 29 years, we could do the math, it's a lot of neighborhoods out there I've talked with. That's the main reason why most neighbor associations do not move forward. They're concerned about a CHAP review increasing the costs to maintain and rehab their house. That's the bottom line. So that's what we think that the conservation districts can really help. It would make affordable those changes by not having those design review on many of the components, but it would also have a design review for some of the components that are really important to create that character. So that's the main reason. So let me move forward and see, this is how staff thinks the process to become a local historic, a local conservation district would look like. It would look very similar to local historic districts. The establishment of the conservation districts would be initiated by the community. The community is always the bus driver. You can say maybe the CHAP staff is the navigator and somehow or has the map in his lap and saying, make it right here or whatever. But the bus driver is always the community. That's very important. I think that's very important to us and all of us. And then once the community became interested in a conservation district, CHAP staff would work with that community extensively in an iterative community outreach to gain supports from the property owners. And then, so we would go out to neighborhood association meetings, provide information to put into Facebook pages, gov delivery, mass emails, brochures, newsletters, whatever the ways to get the information out there. Once CHAP staff and the community believe that we've done a very good community outreach process, then we would schedule a hearing. We would have a mailing to all the property owners. In that mailing, we would ask for them to give us their support or opposition, sort of in a survey of a conservation district. We would take that information, provide it to a public hearing at CHAP. At that first public hearing, the commission would say, yeah, it looks like you've done a great job, or no, you need to do a little bit more on the community outreach. We think the community's there or not there. If you think it is there, then you would move us forward to a second hearing. At that second hearing, that's when staff would present to the commission the full and proper study that would be given to the city council for a city council ordinance. And that full and proper study, of course, is the history, the descriptions, the boundaries, to make sure it meets the criteria, and a listing of the contributing, non-contributing structures, et cetera. So once we get that, then we would jump into we would work with the city council person, and that city council person would introduce a bill for conservation district designation, and it would follow the historic, the mayor said the ordinance process through the mayor and city council. And that's it. So right there. So let's look at the equity analysis here. There's two ways that we looked at it. We looked at it generally, and then we looked at it through the Department of Planning's equity lens. So the first thing just to say is in Baltimore, local historic district designation is a grassroots process and centrally controlled by the stakeholders. We think that's equitable. We think that make sure that the neighborhood is actually driving the process from the beginning to the end is really important. Although we think that's important and equitable, we think it is inequitable that many of our neighborhoods lack historic preservation tools, hence the creation of the conservation district. Therefore, staff believes the conservation district is a tool that will make CHAP's overall program more equitable. We think it will allow for more affordable alterations while preserving the overall historic character of the neighborhoods. It would allow for a process for public input for major alterations, new constructions, and demolition. Historic properties in conservation districts would be eligible to apply for the state and local preservation tax credit, and potentially the state tax credit. And also those are the three main reasons why we think conservation districts will increase equitability in the work that we do at CHAP. Now let's look at it through the Department of Planning Equity Action Plan. And these are the four areas they look at. Structural equity, what historic advantages or disadvantages have affected residents in a given community. Procedural equity, how are residents who have been historically excluded from planning processes being authentically included in the planning, implementation, and evaluation of a proposed policy. Distributional equity, does the distribution of civic resources and investment explicitly count for potential racially disparate outcomes? And transgenerational equity, does this policy or project result in unfair burdens on future generations? So, and we looked at it, and so we think that the Conservation District program is structurally equitable because it seems to be appropriate tool to preserve historic character in neighborhoods with many residents on limited means. Conservation districts would allow for the protection of the most important aspects of historic character while not imposing a financial burden on property owners. We believe it's equitable procedurally. Conservation district designation would allow more neighborhoods to participate in design review for their neighborhoods. It would provide a public forum for neighborhood associations to participate in the redevelopment of their communities. Distributional equity. Conservation districts would allow for more property owners to participate in the local tax credit program and hopefully the state tax credit program. And transgenerational equity. Conservation districts would help preserve historic buildings for generations to come. In short, historic preservation tools should be available to all historic neighborhoods in Baltimore City. Conservation districts will expand preservation efforts greatly. So the initial response, we've been talking about this for a while now, and we think many neighborhoods have been very, very supportive. And these conversations are not official, of course, but what we see them as overwhelmingly positive. But one of the great ideas that I think have come out of this is that staff has also heard from community organizations and city council members that the creation of conservation districts provides the opportunity for city agencies to collaborate more with each other. Within the conservation district ordinance, we could require that city agencies create strategies that support conservation districts. So here are some ideas of how we could do that, or how the city can do that. We could ask or compel the Department of Planning to create a strategic plan that would accompany the designation. So we have a designation of a conservation district, and then we would have an accompanying strategic or master plan for that neighborhood. We could ask DHCD to provide a strategy to prioritize revitalization and conservation areas. We could ask DOT to prioritize their improvements in conservation districts. Another one on here I was thinking about, since I think Ms. Parker is still here, the idea of maybe the Sustainability Commission can create an accompanying plan of how we can be more sustainable in the conservation districts. So I think there's a lot of ideas that are swirling around of how we can better collaborate with our sister agencies and commissions. So potential issues here. There may be efforts of current local historic districts wanting to become conservation districts. What do we do about that? What is the commission's policy on that? Would having individualized guidelines for each conservation district be unmanageable? I think that we could figure out how to manage it, but that's a question that we would really want to ask and make sure that we think about. There's also staff. We got to make sure that we have enough staff to not only create the conservation districts, but actually to implement the design review that comes along with that. So that's it. That's my whole thing. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions.
This is unusual. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Eric?
John Bullock. Did you get any pushback in any of the conversations you've had? Any other concerns other than the cost that you had mentioned?
No, not really. Most, and I've talked to lots, from Forest Park to Coppin Heights to the Walbrook area, Oliver, Johnson Square, Wyman Park, Charles Village. So very different, socially economic neighborhoods as well as architectural neighborhoods. And all of them were very interested in this idea. So I really haven't received that much. That concerns me a little bit. So, what am I forgetting kind of thing. But but no, I've heard mostly positive about this idea.
Yes.
Question. So, and thanks for the presentation, Eric. Where it says allows for more affordable alterations while preserving the character of neighborhoods. We have a lot of local historic districts. We are managing the same, historic character. What's the difference between more affordable within those districts versus the local historic districts?
Let me just bring it down to the main read. the main reason, I think, is that most people, when they replace windows in local historic districts, in order to meet the guidelines, those windows are a lot more expensive than sort of the vinyl window that you could pick up at Home Depot. So what we could do if in a conservation district, we would not require replacement of in-kind or materiality. We would require that maybe a window replacement meets the original window opening, and that's as far as we go with the design review.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. This is Commissioner Powell. So you used the word materials, so is that also like, vinyl siding might be permitted in rear elevations and conservation districts, stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that it was,
Yes.
that's kind of one of the
Yeah.
ways that this could be flexed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think what we would do during the designation process, staff would work with the community. We would identify the major character defining features, and then from there, we would sort of craft what we think would be the design guidelines, or craft what alterations we want to see.
Quick question. Have you thought about or have ideas on the interface between conservation districts and I'll say like UDAP? So right now, we have local historic districts that are very much a separate function in design review from UDAP, such that it's actually mentioned in the zoning code. Anything that falls under CHAP's purview doesn't have design review under that particular authority. Is the idea that conservation districts would still fall under that blanket authority, meaning not just the kind of delineated pieces for rehab, but new construction, or would that live outside of the realm? Because now you'd have to kind of split or consider both.
The way that I'm thinking now, and this is just, staff, that new construction, demolition, and let's say major additions in conservation districts would follow the exact same process as local historic districts through the CHAP process, and as the CHAP process is coordinated with the other city review processes. So it would be very much like a local historic district for the big projects.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lynn, I just quick confirmation. So to establish a historic local district process, that process is very similar to this process as well. It's almost identical. So is the time frame, what is the general time frame to establish a historic district, on average? And will that basically be the kind of the same thing that we're looking at for a local conservation district? It'll have like when reading the process, it looks like a 6-month thing. It could be a year thing, maybe. But I'm just making the assumption. Is that what you're seeing?
That's an incredibly insightful question, because the local historic, yes, the processes would be almost identical. But I would imagine, or I would believe, well, I believe that the conservation district process would go a heck of a lot quicker. And this is the reason why. Most of the amount of time it takes to be a local historic district is on the front end, is that community outreach process, that consensus building process. First time that Ashburton ever talked to us was 1976. And they became a district in 2004. So it takes a long time because it's a really significant decision for the neighborhood. You're giving up sort of some of your property rights. But I think in a conservation district, I think that process, or that community outreach and consensus building process, would be a lot shorter. I think it could take us 4 months, 6 months, and then maybe the regular 6 to 9 months going through the formal commissions. Does that answer your question?
Any other commissioners? Eric, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 9 people who signed in on this topic, but we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who wanted to testify. So I'm going to read those names. If I pronounce your name wrong, please forgive me. But luckily, we should be okay today. The first one is Kevin Holly. Come on up, Kevin. Kevin, when you come to the mic, give us your full name for the record.
I'm Kevin Holly. I'm the program manager for the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation. I've never spoken in a forum like this before, but I appreciate the chair bringing us in with a little go-go beat, so to make everybody feel comfortable. I come to this topic through I'm a realtor as well, so I went to the Live Baltimore session on selling property in Baltimore City, and one of the topics was CHAP, tax credit. And going in, as they start to introduce the topic, it sounds, and by the way, Johns Hopkins did the presentation. He just actually had pre-recorded it, so he didn't do it that day, but it was his presentation. And they go in by explaining all the great incentives and the great opportunity to, get investments back for doing the houses. But then the second half is all the restrictions. And when you get to the restrictions, it becomes unworkable. In terms of what people are looking for today in the section we're working West North Avenue, 2700 to 2900 West North Avenue, and it's extensive work. It's an area that will be upcoming, but it's going to take a minute to get there. So, you don't have a lot of people with a lot of money coming there at this point. So we are doing projects now that are coming in anywhere between $170,000 and $220,000 to do the construction. And then we did appraisals to get the valuation for the sale. That'll be $240,000 to $250,000. So that's kind of close margins. With something like this, if you took away some of the restrictions and could still realize the investment, it'd be a great tool to help revitalize those neighborhoods. When I heard things like you had to do with the wood windows as opposed to the vinyl, 3 times more expensive. In these houses, you're basically replacing all the windows. You have to gut rehab, you have to change floor plans. And I think, as I understood the previous credit, you had to sort of have similar floor plans to what would be in a building in that type. And so now people want the open floor plan. I do know that specifically said, no, you couldn't do the open floor plan just out in that credit. So, you want people to open floor plans and all kinds of other things that just weren't realizable in that construct. So if we can get the benefit of the investment dollars and allow people to get the houses that they want to have, I think it'll be a great benefit to the community.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on our list, Crystal Parker.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Crystal Parker, and I am coming to you today as a resident, a community leader in the greater Rosemont Coppin Heights community, as well as staff for the Coppin Heights CDC. For the past year, through the CDC, I've been privileged to lead the Conservation District pilot conversation on the boots on the ground level. This included a community walk to point out several of the forgotten gems and historic landmarks along the West North Avenue corridor. Last fall, early spring, in surveying our neighborhoods and providing information and engaging in conversation, we found a great deal of public support for this project. Most significant is the support in favor of the increased equity that conservation districts would bring to underserved neighborhoods in our city as it relates to historic tax credit usage. We have also met with several city leaders, including councilpersons James Torrance and Odette Ramos. In both instances, we found support for the general concept of conservation districts and our pilot. The idea behind this pilot would give us the opportunity to work out any unforeseen difficulties or challenges and allow us to begin as we simultaneously engage in the legislative process, which could be time-consuming. We have a very active West North Avenue revitalization project with dozens of houses currently acquired and under construction. We are developing houses as well as partnering with other developers throughout the city. The overall goal and objective to establishment of conservation districts in Baltimore is simply equity. Since the inception of historic districts, they have been an aspect of institutional racism aimed at Black and brown communities throughout the U.S. Baltimore has researched the establishment of a district several times before. However, the Coppin Heights CDC is now in the forefront of this latest effort because we are proposing not only the establishment of conservation districts throughout the city, but a pilot conservation district for West North Avenue. We are going to push for the city ordinance change, but that must go through the mayor, the city council, and perhaps the state of Maryland. We have proposed a pilot from the 1900 through the 2900 blocks of West North Avenue. The CDC has already begun the work to ensure revitalization without displacement. Our aim is to create new and maintain former legacy and history of time and place. Given our community's willingness to become a conservation district, based upon our survey, we ask that piloting this effort be an option work for Coppin Heights CDC. Thank you for your time and attention.
That was perfect. Right on the money. Right on the money. Wow. Johns Hopkins.
Hi, sorry. Good afternoon. Johns Hopkins, Baltimore Heritage. I just want to maybe make 2 points. We are in support of exploring conservation districts. And as we have thought it as Baltimore Heritage and my board, we kind of went back to the very beginning, at least, of why do we even have historic districts? What does it mean? Like, why are we doing this as communities? And really at the heart of that is trying to give residents some power over how their neighborhoods shape, how they get better, how they stop deteriorating. It's to put power into people's arms, hands, who live there. And so in 1964, we got one tool, CHAP districts, and that was great, and that seemed to do pretty well. But we're now, I can't do the math, but we're 60-some years later, and it clearly has done well, that one tool, for some communities, but not for all communities. And when we look across a city like Baltimore, which is very different than a city like Annapolis or a city like Westminster or a city like any other city, we've got a heck of a diversity in historic neighborhoods. Rich, poor, somewhere in between, mostly Black, mostly white, somewhere in between, almost immaculately intact, lots of disinvestment, somewhere in between. It seems that we need more tools, more approaches to give that fundamental concept of putting power into people's hands to shape their own destinies. That's number one. Number two, very quickly, from my standpoint, working with historic neighborhoods, it almost always takes a catastrophe for neighborhoods to want to become a CHAP district. It takes, I'm thinking of Woodbury and the demolition of the houses there. I'm thinking of Fells Point and the demolition on Broadway and in the eastern part of that. It takes something really bad to happen, and I think we all know those things are not good, and it's not good to let those happen, but maybe the bigger threat is the years and years and years of neglect and slow deterioration that happens when there's no designation at all in a district. And so we have neighborhoods like Ashburton that took 30 years of thinking about it to finally make it. We've got neighborhoods out there in West Baltimore and in East Baltimore that still are not even thinking about it because they're too afraid to do it. All the time, the clock ticks, the deterioration happens. And if we come up with a conservation tool that gives them reason to jump on board now instead of waiting longer or waiting for the catastrophe, that is a fantastic opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Monica Bland.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Monica Bland. I'm a resident of Evergreen Lawn neighborhood and a member of the Education Committee of CHCDC. And my presentation is going to be a little creative, so I ask that you bear with me. Preservation is dedication to the education of future generations. It is the commitment that we won't omit the past at the expense of the future. Whose future? Christian, Brendan, Bria, and Zoe's. Who are they? They are my four only grands, and the reason I'm here today to take a stand so they will be able to continue to tell the story of what my grandfather and grandmother and uncle and aunts did, though glorious, they did it not for glory. My grandmother Ruth served as a nurse at Lutheran Hospital, one of the few where Black people went. And my grandfather Walter served as a mailman and the Evergreen Lawn Community Association president. My uncle Walter Jr. politicked in the 44th as a delegate while teaching at CCBC and served the people in 21215 and 216. James Mosier is the school my aunts integrated during the time when Jim Crow's era separated. So when it was my time to attend school number 144, I could have a friend who was white. Yes, my family helped make wrong right. This is my family's legacy. It's also my life and my story. Their struggles and their troubles have been my inspiration to make a difference. So it just makes sense to me, see? Because buildings are more than brick and mortar. If walls could talk, they say, they present a host of reasons today. And so as my time gets shorter, I lift my voice, asking you to make the choice to honor the past and making sure that it lasts by approving all applications for the preservation of districts for conservation, for future generations, for my Christian, my Bria, my Bryn, my Zoe, so their children can continue to tell our story. Thank you.
If possible, can we get a copy? You know, it's nice. Last on our list is Carla Henson.
I wish I had signed in before you. I'm not a poet. My name is Carla Hudson. I am testifying on behalf of Cross Street Partners. We're in favor of this legislation or this idea. CSP is a vertically integrated real estate development company that specializes in adaptive reuse and historic preservation. At our two housing developments in projects in East Baltimore, Henderson Crossing and Biddle Street, we utilize or in the process of utilizing the CHAP tax credit for 44 vacant home for the redevelopment of 44 vacant homes. The CHAP tax credit has been a key factor in deciding whether to rehab or demolish these homes, and has also been key in creating first-time home buyers and encouraging low-income neighbors to buy homes. Of the 29 homeowners who have purchased a home that used the CHAP tax credit, 12 were low income and 23 were first-time home buyers. Almost all of these residents were new to the city of Baltimore. To the extent that that the local conservation districts would help to encourage greater utilization of the CHAP tax credit, we believe that this would help preserve the historic urban fabric of our communities, encourage home ownership, and attract new residents. Furthermore, efforts to align conservation districts with the national historic districts and the MHT districts would help to make development a little bit easier and streamlined, and to encourage investment in more neighborhoods.
Thank you. Thank you. So, commissioners, right here we have a discussion. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute to this amazing discussion? Yes, Tamara.
I'll say my two-piece. Are you okay? I say it? No, I really, this one is personal and professional for me because it was, what was it, almost 20 years ago that we were driving around Barclay in East Baltimore Midway. And Eric Holcomb and I had a crazy thought. We said a what if, because if you remember the time around 2005, which is pretty similar, now we're in 2023, where in so many cases it's cheaper to demolish. And what if we incentivized rehabilitation? What if we said, you know, some of these features in neighborhoods that were not local historic districts, what if they are seen just as special as? And how do we bring that to fruition? And so it's really exciting to even have this discussion. We don't know where it'll end or where it'll go, but I really do just want to commend Eric Holcomb and Dr. Rodwell and CHAP staff for really, taking it this far because it's so critical about the conversation around equity and the conversation around neighborhood redevelopment, around the conversation of the reality of developers, of what they deal with every day and making hard choices. So I think that this is such a perfect and a proper venue, and I'm just really excited and hopeful to see where it'll go.
Very cool, very cool. Anyone else? Yeah, yes, Kate Powell.
I obviously, I think, I don't know if I can echo everyone, but it's great to see this process and great to see this development. So it's very exciting. I think it's been wanted and desired for quite some time. I would just say that, because it's so important and so critical, that when this discussion continues and gets towards implementation, that we do take those potential issues to heart and make those and start addressing those as soon as possible, because those will be the things that will want to be figured out as soon as possible. So I think, staffing, a budget for staffing is probably going to be, a huge ask. My assumption is going to be the influx of communities that are going to come and want to do these districts very quickly. And it's going to be a long line, right, to do that. And that's going to be a huge undertaking, right? The other thing that I think is going to be just a big concern, that we just want to make sure that there's proper effort, which will probably come with funding and staffing up. But in terms of the one above is going to be something that will be, I'm wondering how that will be mitigated when it comes to existing districts and new districts, and then trying to be able to communicate the protocol and the clarity between all these different districts. Because this is like a CHAP light, right? And all the districts and all the developers and homeowners and everything could be across the street from each other in different districts. And there's a big tension on sort of a lot of even currently right now, without conservation districts, where a district's edge meets a non-district edge, and it could be literally across the street or even a block over. So I think the staffing up is not even just in the influx of the process of the protocol establishing, but hugely, I think, is going to be more about establishing the clear sort of distinction between the two, the whole process of the two different districts. And I almost wondered, that it's not necessarily just this and that a suggestion to say, hey, it might be a global look at everything, not just adding another district type, but looking at across sort of umbrella of trying to avoid those conflicts, so. But otherwise, I'm very excited, and thank you, Dr. Orwell, and everyone here that fought so hard for it, so.
Point well taken, Bob. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Hello? Well, per our regulations, we don't, because we're in discussion. But next time, and there will be a next time. Yeah. Well, Dr. Rob, I want to really say thank you. First of all, thank you for your kind words. Didn't see that coming, so thank you, sir. I appreciate you. I appreciate it. I want to thank the commission. We've gone on a lot of journeys together, and this is one cool one, so let's do it. Eric, I want to ask you, is there anything that we need to do as a commission moving forward to assist you with next steps?
Trying to figure out what the next steps are.
Understood. Well, I think what I saw you wrote some points down. Would you like to share them with the commission? You wrote some notes.
Sure. I think a couple of things I heard from the audience is, to make sure or look into having less stringent design guidelines for the tax credit in the conservation district. So how is the tax credit going to be used in conservation districts? The Coppin Heights CDC, they want to be first, So I think having a sort of a pilot conservation district, is there a way to sort of get them right behind or concurrent with the legislation? to create the conservation districts. That's something we can work with. Johns Hopkins talked about, making sure that the power goes back into the neighborhoods, give more neighborhood control. And I think that's definitely one of the equitable reasons for conservation districts. And he also said it takes a catastrophe. I think he's absolutely right with that. And maybe this is a way to try to be a little bit more proactive. Yeah, this is definitely, a lot of people think of it as a way for greater utilization of that tax credit. Commissioner Woods, I think you were the one that sort of coined the term CHAP light. It was probably you.
To some dismay.
Right.
Some liked it, some didn't, but probably.
Right, well, I like it. But it is, this tool may be a way of preventing demolition and making the rehab competitive with sort of demolition new construction. And we do have to find funding and staffing up. My conversations with the city council folks is that there seems to be support for staffing for a conservation district program. So, how do we pursue that is going to be really important. And I'm looking at our advocacy groups too to help out with that. So and I like what Commissioner Land said about looking at it globally. I mean, I just thought, well, heck, man, we could make local historic districts less restrictive if we wanted to too. I don't know if that's what we want to do.
Right.
And I know that Washington, D.C. has pretty much moved to a model of creating design guidelines for each and every local historic district. So, and right now we have one great big huge book for all of our districts. We used to have a little brochure, a little piano 11 by 14 brochure, and but then we've switched up to, and now we're going to probably increase that size of our design guidelines. So that's what I have.
Gotcha. You get it. Go right ahead, Nicole.
Sure, Nicole Battle. I mean, to your point, Eric, I guess that's really kind of where my question came from, because there could still be seen a separation, right? And it not being fully equitable, given that your requirements are one way for historic districts and then another way for conservation districts. And given what I do for a living, affordability is always a concern for me. And so it's almost like you can have people who may not be able to afford, you still have that separation. So like if you were living in a historic district, you may not be able to afford it. So let's go to a CHAP light community because I can afford to live there as opposed to have my house in a CHAP community. So I mean,
with additional restrictions.
yeah. Because, and I mean, coming from my personal experience as well as professional. I've lived in a historic community as long as I've been in Baltimore, the same historic community. And I ended up purchasing a house in that historic community. I've been a homeowner for 20 plus years. And it's expensive. And so it's great that essentially we could possibly get a majority of the city to really pay attention to the historic beauty that we have of Baltimore City. But I do want us to also be aware that as we change the requirements for one versus the other, it still creates that separation.
Yeah, can I just chime in? Oh, go ahead.
You go right ahead.
No, I think part of the conversation that we've had through the years about this was really what are we trying to protect? And I don't know if that's been answered. Obviously, that's still the question. But, you speak to hierarchy in terms of process of, the full local district versus a CHAP light or a conservation district. And you speak to who, a developer versus a what, which might be architectural significance. And what is it that we're trying to preserve? I think that's still, part of the question, because one of the things that, at least that I look at and that we all look at is there's something special and tangible that we know leaves when there's demolition. So how do we weigh that, and how much do we force that to be held to a standard? So those are I think some of the questions and thoughts that we would still have to have against, how much does it, to Mr. Holly's point, cost to rehab some very expensive buildings, and we know that certain ways that architecture was done in the past will never come back. And so I think that's that's the question I think a lot of people are just going to weigh, and you bring up such a perfect, point.
Oh, go ahead, Harold. Go ahead, Garrett.
Garrett Power. I think we can all sit here and embrace and applaud the aspiration of the Conservation District, but we're also all anticipating the restrictions imposed. And I think the rubber will hit the road. The real conflicts will come as we have disappointed players who would like to do something with a conservation district that they will be unable to do, or that will cost them extra money. And I mean, we can imagine some of the people so disappointed. We may have people living there, or presently the landlord there, who do not want to pay extra expenses in order to continue that tenure arrangement. We will have landowners who have been holding their property in anticipation of speculative opportunity once the neighborhood turned around. And in terms of timing, they might very much prefer to do nothing for the time being and hope for the best. We can imagine other players who are at the public meetings we hold be very unhappy by the way in which the Conservation District restrictions will play out in terms of their anticipated property rights. So this discussion is an easy one in that we can see the goals, and we are discounting and postponing the future, dealing with the cost and the hostility of the conservation districts once they're put in play. So this is the reality of the conservation district, and we need to look at the disappointments as well as the opportunities.
Point well taken. Thank you, Garrett. Well, Commissioner Rodwell, I know you will, please continue your committee meetings, everything that you do. Eric, I know you all will keep us up to date. Commissioners, I only ask that any additional opportunities of information that you see may be opportunities to this or challenges, share it with Dr. Rodwell and share it with Eric as they brainstorm how to do this. And lastly, I want to thank all in attendance who gave their public testimony. Appreciate it, and definitely appreciate the poem, so thank you for that. With that, this discussion is closed. We will move on to the next topic on our agenda, which is let me hit the gavel first. 517 South Wolf Street, Fells Point Historic District, request demolition hearing 1, determination of architectural significance of rear one-story garage, applicant Mary Bickford. The staff is Mr. Eddie Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. We have, as the chairman said, demolition hearing 1, determination of architectural significance of a rear one-story garage at 517 South Wolf Street. The actual garage building is on the South Chapel Street side. The property in question actually was reviewed previously by the CHAP Commission for a kind of a hybrid addition to it. It's here pointed out in the arrow facing South Chapel Street. It's a one-story garage. It's received conceptual approval for a two-story addition. If you recall, one side was Italianate and the other side was a cottage style. So on top of a mid-20th century garage building. So it was really a non-cohesive conglomeration of architecture. The applicants propose to demolish the one-story garage. They have been looking at the structural conditions of the building and the site parameters and wish to pursue this course instead at this time. They do wish to come back at a later point to look at a holistic new approach to the proposal. CHAP staff look at the sections 3.6 demolition procedures of the Baltimore State Preservation Rules and Regulations, specifically demolition hearing 1, determination of architectural significance. We see here again from another angle, looking from the east, looking west, the garage in question. Most of the buildings are 2 or 3 story structures located in this part of Fells Point. The building is a 1-story garage in the late Italianate style that faces the rear alley of South Chapel Street. The garage was once part of a 3-bay brick garage on the site built. Actually, since I've wrote this, I've been able to determine with the help of the property owner somewhere between 1938 and 1951. Technically still within the period of significance of Fells Point. However, the surviving portion of the building has a brick pier and minimal brick detail cornice over a pair of late 20th century replacement shed doors. The roof is flat and exposed sidewall reveals a single door entry that once opened into the car bays that were once part of the structure. The cornice of the north pier shows deterioration from the removal of the other bays. A small group of bricks remain in the open lot where the other pier once stood, and the north side of the open lot remains the north wall that can still be seen. Here is from the 1914 to 1951 map, Sanborn fire insurance map. It showed originally that there was a 3-car garage building. It was actually much shorter in length. It's actually now longer. That was added on most recently prior to the designation of the historic district. The structure here, once again, we see in detail the corner where they cut off part of the cornice as they removed the other 2 bays of the garage structure. This was done prior to the designation of the historic district and prior to the ownership of this particular owner. We see some of the deterioration at the top corner and the walls remaining on the opposite wall and the remnant of the pier that once stood there of the other bays. And here we get a better idea of the almost what would have been the original 3-bay garage structure. The garage was built within the period of significance, but because 2/3 of the structure has been demolished, it has lost its original historic context. It does not appear to have been designed or built by anyone of historic significance. It is a utilitarian building that has no architectural significance. The garage building is not associated with any broad pattern of Baltimore's history or is associated with lives of persons significant to Baltimore's past or embodies the work of a master or likely to yield information important to the history of Baltimore. The Community Association was provided the plans for review, and they support the demolition of the 1-story garage. Staff recommends that the garage does not contribute to the historic character of the local historic district. Thank you.
Eddie, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Eddie? Okay. Eddie, thank you so much. We have 2 names, but only one person wants to testify. The name is Stephen Lambredi. I apologize if I pronounced your last name wrong.
Yeah, Lambredi.
Oh, Lambredi, okay.
If you're going to a lamp store, to get your lamp, you might say, "Is my lamp ready?"
Gotcha.
Is this on? Yeah. All right, so I'm a friend of the property owner, and I've examined the property in person, and I can say that it is deteriorated, and I know that her desire is to build something there and make it a cohesive design, which would be brought for review later. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you. Eddie, oh, you already have us at a recommendation page. Gotcha. Commissioners, any conversation related to this topic?
Eddie, will the present garage hold a modern automobile?
Let me see. I don't believe it could. I mean, if you look at the, if you look at the other vehicles that are parked in the two other bays, it could conceivably hold a small vehicle.
But you couldn't get out. That's what it's under.
Yeah.
Is it a garage if it will not hold an automobile?
Lawyer, here we go. Commissioners, anyone else like to share any comments on this?
I defer to answer.
Okay. The recommendation is on in front of us. Staff recommends that the garage does not contribute to the historic character of the local historic district for 517 South Wolf Street. Do I have anyone who'd like to put the recommendation forward?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Do I have any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstain? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
That will conclude our hearing for today. So before we conclude, do we have any old business? Do we have any new business? Dr. Rob, I'd like for you to close it out for us, then go right and close it out.
Well, I think that I'm really pleased that we were able to have this discussion. I stated at the end that it's a question of political will, and so recognizing the comments by everyone around the table, this is a journey that we are on together, and it has some aspects that we have to figure out. And but I think that political will is important, and I think that where there is a will to figure things out, we can do that. And I look forward to working with you all and reaching that goal.
Doc, thank you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just, with the next steps, I was kind of flip on you. I apologize for that. I think what I'd like to do is, staff will continue ensuring that people have the ability to provide us with comments and testimony through anything from a phone conversation to emails, and we'll still continue to gather that for the next few weeks at least. I do think that we need to have maybe another public hearing to solicit conversations. We could do that as soon as November or December. And at that time, I could take some of your comments. I mean, there were some really big ideas that were tossed out, Commissioner Battle and Commissioner Leon, about those, and maybe we can look at that a little bit further at a next sort of meeting and have more of a discussion on that. Does that sound like a next step forward?
Sounds like a next step. And I think it's going to be important for us to develop our strategy for connecting with our city council folk. There were a couple that we had some conversations with, and they were very enlightening. And I think that we need them engaged in the process sooner rather than later.
Understood. I call this
I'll just
meeting.
say one
Oh,
thing.
go ahead, Kip.
I'll
I'm
just say-
sorry.
I would just add that if Coppin has the energy right now, and that there is a potential to do a pilot effort, it would be great to push that as far up on the list as possible. I don't know how that works, but not to drag that effort a long time. I mean, they're at the table, so it would be great to see how that could look like for them.
That's good. Great
Thank you for that.
conversation. Meeting adjourned 2:30. Thank you all for coming.